Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second community workshop for the downtown Watsonville specific plan. As folks are joining, let's give them a few more minutes. We'll wait another minute or so. Right, I think we'll get started now. Welcome, everyone. My name is Simran Malhotra. I'm a principal with Remy and Associates, and we are leading a multidisciplinary team for the preparation of the downtown Watsonville specific plan. Glad to see you all here today. Please note this meeting is being live streamed on Facebook and it's also being recorded. Let me start by sharing my screen. All right, Spanish translation is available during this meeting. Carlos, would you announce how to access the Spanish channel?
Buenas tardes para los que necesiten traducción al español o simplemente prefieren escuchar en español. En la parte de abajo de su pantalla van a ver el pequeño mundo que dice interpretación. Pueden hacer clic ahí y pueden escoger el español. Así van a estar escuchando toda la presentación en español. Done. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. We also want to review some of the Zoom meeting tools that are available. Please note that the microphone and camera button are located at the bottom of your screen, and these toggle on and off. During the presentation, all microphones will be off. If you have a question or comment later on, please unmute yourself. You can also raise your hand for any questions or submit a written comment or question through using the chat feature during the meeting. We'll also capture all the chat for the meeting notes. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can. So feel free to share your thoughts and comments in using chat. For any technical difficulties, please email Elena at the city, and the email address is listed on the screen. And now I'd like to turn this over to Susie to say some welcoming remarks. Susie Miriam, the Community Development Director for the City of Watsonville.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've got a lot of information that the team is going to cover tonight, and then we want to get your feedback as well on these ideas. I think some of you may have been involved in our advisory committee meeting last Wednesday, where we went over this information as well. We've got the vision and guiding principles that we've done. We've got the street area and streetscapes we're looking at. and also ideas for infill opportunities that we're going to be going over with you tonight, as well as character areas. So I wanted to just introduce the city staff here. If I can, let's see, make my screen bigger and introduce everyone. We've got Justin Meek. He's our principal planner, and he is the project manager for the Downtown Specific Plan. We have got Carlos Landaveri, who is providing translation tonight. He is our housing manager in the housing division. We've got Sarah Weichel. She is our assistant planner, and she is going to be taking notes and monitoring the Facebook page as well as the chat. Of course, we've got Elena in our department. She's making all things Zoom work, as well as monitoring all issues and technical difficulties. And so with that, again, just want to thank you all. We do have some raffles tonight as well, so glad that you you checked in, and I'll turn it back over to Simran.
Thank you, Susie. I'd also like to, before we get started, I'd like to introduce some of the consultant team who's here. From the RAMI team, we have Kelsey Hubbard, who'll be helping facilitate one of the small groups later. And she's an intermediate planner with our firm. We have Sergeant Town Planning, represented by Peter Vanderwall, Senior Principal, and Andrew Krisman. Peter will be presenting a portion of the presentation shortly. And Megan Weir and Zach Zabel from Nelson Nygaard, they are our team's transportation planners, and Megan you'll hear from Megan as well. And Zach and Andrew will help facilitate the small groups later on. So today we want to present some of the recommendations that our team has developed for downtown. And this includes an update of the character area that we had presented to you all last time we met, which was last fall, and give you an update on what the team has been working for the last several months. We also have some concepts for catalytic opportunity sites and changes to the street and bike networks that we wanted to present to you and get your feedback on. We'll then break out into small groups and be able to dive deeper into each of these topics, and then we'll come back to the larger group and do a report back from those discussions so that everyone can hear what each group discussed. And at the end of the meeting, we want to encourage you all to participate in a survey, and we'll have a raffle at the end of the meeting as well. And as Susie mentioned, we'll start off with our first raffle, and the prize is a gift card for a local business at Ace Hardware. Kelsey, can you provide me with the link to share, or would you like to share your screen instead? I can stop sharing real quickly.
Just send it to you. I think it should work, but I can share my screen too.
Okay, I'll just share it here. Hold on a second. Share screen.
Oh, no, those are not the names.
Oh.
I'll share my
Sorry,
screen.
maybe you should share your screen.
All right.
Apologies.
All right. Looking good. Here we go.
All right. All right.
Winner
Looks
is
like we have a
Steve.
winner.
Steve, if you could message me privately and send me your phone number, we'll have the city get in touch with you.
Okay. Elena, we are seeing a message about some issue with the Facebook feed. I'm assuming you are looking into that.
Yes, we're still troubleshooting, but we should be up soon.
Okay, all right. Well, let's keep going then. Before we get started on the presentation, I also want to acknowledge that there are several members of the advisory committee who are here today. And if you want to raise your hands, wave so that everyone can see. Thank you for all the time you take to be a part of the advisory committee and give us your feedback there. So let's start briefly with what is the Downtown Watsonville Specific Plan. It's a specific plan is a document that provides a vision, goals, and policies and zoning for a small area within a city. And it provides regulations for what uses are allowed, how much can be built, and standards such as height, setbacks, parking, and other design elements. It also contains recommendations for transportation, infrastructure, and other elements of the public right-of-way, sidewalks, street trees, bicycle lanes, etc. And you'll hear about all of the our recommendations for those, our initial recommendations for those later on in this presentation. Very briefly, just a reminder, the Downtown Watsonville Specific Plan area is about 200 acres, just under that, and the streets and the right-of-ways are about 55 of those acres. So the private land within downtown is the difference, about 150 acres or so. Overall, the project is a 2.5-year process. We started in the fall of 2019 and really geared up last year. We've had several advisory committee meetings, and we had a community workshop last fall where we worked with you all to develop vision themes and guiding principles. These themes, which I'll show on an upcoming slide, were then formed the basis for the recommendations that we are presenting today. And the recommendations will be refined with your input over the summer, and we'll be preparing the plan document that we'll bring back to you in the fall for your review and feedback. And then we anticipate going to the Planning Commission and City Council for review and adoption over the winter, early part of 2022. So as I mentioned, over the fall and winter, we worked on vision themes and guiding principles that will guide the Downtown Watsonville Specific Plan. And the themes were expansive. They included vitality, dignity, equity, preservation, safety, and innovation. And with each of these themes were 8 guiding principles that were identified, which also have strategies associated with those. We had provided these on the city's project page for the downtown plan and asked for comments from the community. And over earlier part of this year, we received over 100 comments based on which we made some changes and refinements to that. And what you see here are the final versions of the guiding principles. And these included preserving key elements that make downtown unique, providing a variety of uses and experiences in downtown, more housing opportunities, improving economic prosperity, improving safety and adding to the vibrancy of downtown, fostering health and inclusiveness, and improving mobility. The one new guiding principle that was added as a part of the feedback we received was tied to making connections to nature. Downtown Watsonville is surrounded by nature. We have the Pajaro River on the south side and the sloughs on the north. And the desire was to incorporate connections to those as well as all over downtown to improve community health. Based on the vision, themes, and guiding principles, as well as what we heard from the advisory committee and the community over the last year or so, there are several big ideas that have influenced the recommendations that we are presenting today. And these are tied to, first and foremost, retaining downtown and its charming historic architecture and its character. Downtown Watsonville is unique. It's with the Watsonville Plaza as its heart, and there was very clear direction that we need to preserve both the plaza as well as the historic architecture that surrounds it. And then the desire to continue to extend what the downtown feels like as being a walkable community, to make improvements and continue to enhance its walkable nature. But there was also an understanding that it needed to have more active uses and more vibrant uses in downtown, and that could be done with new uses, new housing, and more special events and programming that can activate the downtown and make it a true 18-hour downtown where you have activity starting from the morning and going late into the evening. The other big ideas that we heard about were tied to reimagining Main Street as a way to prioritize the pedestrian experience and create a sense of place. And tied to that, to see more streetscape improvements with additional lighting, sidewalk improvements, plantings, etc., that can help make Main Street and the other street network give it a sense of place and be more oriented towards the downtown users. And then tied to that, to address traffic speeds and congestion concerns that people have, and also improve bicycle and pedestrian connectivity and safety. And as we walk through the presentation today, you will see these themes and these ideas reflected in our recommendations. So very briefly, just to orient everyone on what the existing street network is, and you'll hear about what the recommendations for it are. Downtown is bisected by Main Street, which is the historic corridor that runs through the heart of downtown. And there are several regional connectors that bisect downtown. We have Riverside Drive, Beech Street, Lake Avenue, and Freedom Boulevard. And these connect to larger regional destinations like Hollister, Santa Cruz, Corralitos, and Santa Cruz and Monterey. The next layer of the street is tied to internal streets, what we are calling crosstown connectors, and these include the Union, Brennan Couplet, Rodriguez, as well as Walker Street. And then finally, the fine-grained street network of the local streets, which cover the rest of the street network within downtown. There are two Caltrans routes that run through downtown, and these include 129, which is along Riverside Drive, and then the 152 couplet, which is on East Lake, East Beach, and Main Street. As you can see, the fact that there's a Caltrans right-of-way within downtown has an impact on how it functions, and because of that, we are making some recommendations tied to that. And you'll hear more about that from both Peter and Megan later on. The first option we are considering is to maintain the one-way couplet as is today with Lake. As you can see, Lake goes travels west and then turns and goes north on Main Street, while Beach takes the eastbound traffic and then connects on Lincoln Street on the east side of downtown, and then connects back up with Lake further on. The second option is to consider Lake becoming a two-way street again, letting both Lake and Beech becoming two-way streets, and Lake continuing as 152, and that allows certain flexibility in how the street is being treated, and we'll discuss that again momentarily. The reason we are recommending the one-way to a two-way conversion is there are many benefits associated with that, and these are tied to improved access for businesses on those streets, actually safer travel for traffic, improved access for bicycles and pedestrians, tied to speeds, and also economic development in terms of slower speeds allow for more access and visibility of local businesses. And with that, I will ask Peter to present the next portion of the presentation. Peter, are you ready?
Yeah, do you want me to just shift to sharing my screen now?
Sure.
Great. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Simran. So this is a good segue into the opportunities that we're going to walk through with you this evening. And really what the purpose of this slide is just to describe the balancing of priorities. So a lot of the opportunities we're going to look at tonight, some of them relate to specific opportunity sites. So where private infill development could occur. A lot of them are opportunities for transformation of the public realm that would support and in some cases incentivize private development to happen. So the thing to be mindful of as we're looking at all of the options that we're going to explore tonight is downtowns are very layered and complex places, and in particular streets need to serve a number of functions, and in some cases there might be competing interests between some of those functions. So our job as a team working with city staff is to help balance those priorities in ways that we feel will most successfully realize the major goals of this specific plan effort, which is to create a very vibrant, active, and successful downtown Watsonville. So some of those things, obviously streets need to play a vital role in vehicular and transit circulation. They're also a very important part of the bicycle circulation network, which is very important for getting people from the adjacent neighborhoods into the downtown. In the downtown itself, very important for pedestrian circulation, and streets in a downtown setting are really outdoor rooms of a community. So they're the social spaces. They support businesses, by the way, by design of comfortable sidewalks for shoppers and customers to get around. Convenient curbside parking is a consideration for businesses as well. Exposure to customers. So all of these things we are taking into account and thinking hard about as we're looking at some of the opportunities that we're going to explore with you. So if you have questions about sort of how some of these interests might be balanced, I think the breakout groups would be a great time to discuss some of those things. So the way that the presentation tonight is going to be structured in terms of looking at some of the opportunities for downtown is through this this character areas map that we have put together as a team. And really what this is an organizational structure of the downtown based on some of the urban pattern analysis that we did early on, based on us exploring where and what types of specific opportunities there may be, and really observing some of the prevailing urban patterns and characteristics of your downtown. So we've organized it into 8 unique character areas, and there's nothing particularly specific about the exact boundaries of these. None of them have exact boundaries. That's why all of them kind of blur into each other. But really, they represent what we think to be unique areas in downtown, and each of which are going to have different priorities and different opportunities. So the first is the historic downtown core. That's generally the area bounded by Lake, Rodriguez, Union, and 2nd Street, characterized by some very significant historic buildings. Obviously, Watsonville Plaza is in the heart of the core, and really this is what we would consider to be the core of the downtown, where all the major downtown activity is going to be focused. So some of the placemaking priorities for the downtown core require that all ground floors of all buildings are very active. What that means is, they have active uses with that tend to be shop fronts, retail, things that generate human and pedestrian and customer activity. That there's a consistent unifying streetscape throughout the downtown. We want to encourage and enable outdoor dining to happen on the sidewalks of downtown, so that businesses are spilling out onto the sidewalks, into the streets. Maintain a continuous and active street wall in the core. Basically, creating a district that is busy and active and fun, 18 hours of the day. So how do you do that in downtown? So this is an existing conditions image of Main Street, basically at Main and Beech. And as you can see, the street itself is very wide. The sidewalks are very narrow, not particularly conducive to a lot of pedestrian activity out in front of the businesses. You can kind of see where the existing parking lane is, that probably used to be a wider sidewalk. And when this became a Caltrans route, the street was likely widened to add parking at the expense of the wide sidewalks that were there to support the businesses. So, and in the examples that Simran was giving, some of the alternatives that we're exploring with Caltrans in terms of potential either rerouting of the route, or on this particular stretch of Main Street, we think there's actually an opportunity to lose a lane in the northbound direction, because it's not actually part of the Caltrans loop. We'll get into the details of that later on, but what that means is that a big opportunity in the core we see is there could be an opportunity to gain back some of the space that has been lost to vehicular traffic. So what you're seeing here is, and that could happen, both in short-term, more temporary types of improvements, and those could be formalized in the long term to permanent improvements. So what we're looking at here is basically the option to reduce a lane in the northbound direction. So you'd have 2 travel lanes heading southbound, 1 heading northbound. What that would get you would be basically widened sidewalk areas. So the colored stripes you're seeing here are what we call tactical urbanism. Basically, it's using paint and planters, removable furnishing in the street itself to basically extend the functional space of the sidewalks. So as we said, the sidewalks now are quite narrow. There isn't really room to accommodate tables and chairs, active areas in their existing conditions. So if we could create a flex space for now within the existing curb to curb of the street, you could have a much wider, much more active area in front of the businesses. I apologize for the background noise. And then in the long term, those could be formalized into more permanent improvements. So what you're seeing now is the actual physical moving of curbs. Rather than just using straight paint, we could have more formal and permanent landscaping. Tree planters, larger street trees. The potential, in theory, for little medianettes in the middle of the street, where you don't need left turn movements that could lend themselves to mid-block crossings. And really, this could start to really evolve into a different sort of environment. Similarly, on Beech Street, I'll go through this one quickly. So this is Beech in front of the Watsonville Plaza. We would recommend the same thing in the short term. This is actually a very wide segment of Beech in front of the park, which could create an opportunity to add to the sidewalk space in front of the historic building on the north side of Beech. And similarly, those could become formalized later with time. A lot of that would have to do with the ultimate negotiations with Caltrans and whether or not a portion of the route is relinquished. Whether or not it does, whether or not a portion of the route's relinquished, there's certainly an opportunity to take advantage of the wide width of the street here to really create a very active urban environment in front of the storefronts. Very similar on Lake Avenue. So Lake is the other part of the one-way Caltrans couplet. Again, very narrow sidewalks, fairly wide traveled way. What we're looking at here would be the possibility, and this is a short-term illustration. You see the traffic is still 2 travel lanes in each direction, but what we think you could do would be to put parking lane planters. So planters basically in the street, in the parking lane between parked cars, which would visually narrow the street. Eventually, you might replace some of the trees in the existing narrow sidewalk, again to widen the effective width of that, which would lend itself again to improve pedestrian circulation, as well as just more outdoor space in support of the adjacent businesses. And then in the long term, of course, it could, if the Caltrans route could switch from a one-way couplet to a two-way street, it would simply mean that you'd have travel flows in each direction, and look at some of the details of that a little later as well. So now looking at some of what we think to be big opportunities within the downtown core. So what you're looking at here is the mansion building block, on the east side of Main Street. So one of our first observations was the current alignment of Union that kind of swoops down to meet the park, creates this small, somewhat inefficient triangular shaped block on Alexander Street. What was interesting to us when we looked at the historic photos, or a historic photo of downtown, Alexander used to terminate into Beech Street in a straight alignment, and similarly Union would have terminated into buildings lining the park. So our thought was, what if you brought back the original alignment of those crosstown streets? Neither of those streets are carrying a great deal of traffic through the city. So Union Street ends at Riverside, and then Brennan goes on and extends, and forgive me, I've forgotten the name of the street it extends to. But what that would, the opportunity that that would create would be a relatively large, significant new site for opportunity, new site for infill development right in the core of the downtown, that we think could both activate the Watsonville Plaza and could be an opportunity for a significant bank of shared parking and the potential to add a lot of housing right to the core of downtown. So what you're looking at here is, just one example of how that might work with a shared parking structure in the middle of that block, lined with new housing. The housing would likely have, pool decks and podiums. It might have some upper floor terraces that would have magnificent views of the park. And the spaces within the block itself could be very active, usable paseo alley spaces, similar to the examples that we're showing here are the paseos and alleys in Old Town Pasadena. So that's the block on the east side of Main. Now shifting down to the south side of Main, and an important thing to mention in both of these cases, both of these blocks that are right in the core of downtown are some of the larger blocks in downtown. So the network, as you move south, becomes quite a bit more more walkable block sizes in terms of block perimeters and fenestrations through the blocks themselves. But these two large blocks on either side of Main really don't have a lot of circulation through them. So both in terms of being opportunities for new development, as well as for extending circulation network through some of these large blocks is an important consideration. So just quickly here, so you see the orange box that came up there, that's the new Terrace development on Main Street. There is also a proposal now for a new school to develop inside of the Gottschalk building. That would be over commercial on the ground floor. So looking at this block and thinking about how it might be better organized, obviously you have the bus depot on Rodriguez Street. So an important route for pedestrian circulation into downtown could be through this block. And we think that based on reorganizing how the parking works, and that's going to change as the school works out how their pickup and drop off works, there could be an opportunity to get circulation through this block and to Main Street and to the core. And then similar to the block on the east side that we just looked at, we think there could also be a long-term development opportunity, including, again, an opportunity for shared parking in the middle of this block, with perhaps development lining Rodriguez and Lake. So now moving over to the Civic Corps. So Civic Corps is really an extension of the historic core to the south, anchored of course by the new Civic building at 2nd and Main, as well as the existing City Hall campus on the east side, and the post office at 1st and Main. Some of the placemaking priorities here there's an opportunity to redevelop the current Civic Center campus, or the current City Hall campus. We think by relocating some of the existing municipal services elsewhere. We'll show you an example that we've been looking at of potentially moving the current police office to a shared facility with the fire department on Rodriguez. there's what that would do would be to free up a lot of land very close to the downtown core that could be redeveloped either with mixed use development or housing. Obviously continuing consistent unifying streetscape as an extension of downtown south towards Riverside, and an opportunity to leverage some of the underutilized parking that already exists in the existing Civic Center parking structure in support of this as a longer term district. So again, some specific opportunities that we've been looking at. So that's the existing City Hall and Civic Campus. In the much longer term, we think there could be an opportunity to think of a future of the post office site that wouldn't be the post office. So if the City Hall facilities were to relocate, then what you could have on a block like that would be an extension of the Main Street character mixed use buildings, 2, 3, and 4 maybe story buildings on Main. That could look something like that. They could look different from that. And then as you transition towards Union Street, you could have infill development, what we call neighborhood scale multifamily development. So the example on the left is an example actually from South Pasadena. Basically is courtyard housing that from the street just looks like big houses really. And in the context of this particular project, very similar in size and scale to the houses that are across the street. Obviously, these would be a little larger than those on the east side of Union. And this isn't a proposal, just an idea of how that would work. But the main idea would be as you move toward the neighborhood context, that development would scale down sensitive to the context there. And then again, in the long term, if the post office were to ever go away, then the main priority there would be to extend and subdivide that site so that you'd be extending the block network of downtown toward Rodriguez. And what you'd be getting then would be multiple walkable urban scale blocks. And that could, and if that were to happen, that would mean that the intersection of First and Main would really be a significant gateway opportunity for the downtown as downtown really began to extend toward Riverside Drive. So prominent buildings, somebody mentioned in the advisory committee meeting last week, the gateway sign in Salinas, that's what you're seeing on the right there. But that would be a very visible gateway into downtown for traffic coming on Riverside Drive. And then as we mentioned, one possibility for relocation of some of the municipal services would be the current fire station site on 2nd and Rodriguez. So this is just an example of how a new building on fronting onto Rodriguez and a slight reconfiguration of the parking on that site could accommodate police facilities in addition to the fire facilities that are there now. All right, moving on to the commercial flex. So commercial flex is really similar to the Civic Corps. I mean, it's really a transitional area from the downtown core environment on Main Street, extending to the north outside of town. And some of the placemaking priorities there, basic street network is already quite strong. There's already a lot of the historic building stock has been retained in this area. In some cases, we think there's opportunities for some of the buildings to either transition in use or potentially be replaced, and we're going to look at one of the opportunity sites in specific. So this site, if you're not familiar, that's highlighted here at Main 5th is the Ramos Furniture site. So when we looked at this block, again, like the others in the downtown core, we always are looking for ways to create additional connectivity through the block. So there's an existing alley that services the parking areas off for Bank of America and the Ramos Furniture site that's accessed off of 5th Street. There's also a city-owned parking lot that's accessed off of Lake Avenue. They're almost connected, as you can see. So the dashed yellow line simply suggests maybe there's an opportunity to connect those. And that parking lot and existing alley could really function as an alley that would traverse the block. There's also a very beautiful outdoor space in front of this women and infants clinic that currently is not public. In the future, perhaps if that ever changed user or if there could be some kind of joint agreement, we think there could be an opportunity to connect into that. Moving on to this. So what this illustration shows is a new infill building on the Ramos Furniture site. It includes a pedestrian paseo that would connect beside that building to Main, and what we're showing beside and behind the jiu-jitsu business there would be some kind of internal block courtyard that might connect into that existing paseo network of the Women and Infants Center. And then you'll notice south of, west of the Bank of America on their ancillary parking lot, we understand that's underutilized, so that could be an opportunity site for neighborhood scale multifamily development, like a quadplex or a sixplex or something like that. That could be very simply arranged and at the scale of the houses on the neighborhood on 5th Street. So again, like the buildings that we showed in the historic core, this would be a mixed use building along Main Street, could very likely have residential courtyards above. Those courtyards could look something like this. There might be a pool up there, but basically just active social spaces where a lot of people could live very close to the activity of the core of downtown. The Gateway District is the southmost portion of Main Street. We haven't looked at any specific opportunity sites here, but really the opportunities are, again, as you're transitioning, as you're arriving on Main from Riverside or from the communities to the south, we think there's opportunities for gateway signage elements. In the example that we just looked at in the Civic Corps, we showed how that might work at 1st Street, but that could also happen closer to Riverside Drive. And really the most important thing here is that you're experiencing as a traveler a change of environment. So not just by signage, but by seeing a change in the urban patterns that you're entering a new environment. This residential flex area is in place to describe really the transition from the more commercial historic core and commercial flex area to the single family neighborhoods on the east side of Brennan Street. We think that there's some opportunity for the businesses on the west side of Brennan that are across from those from the neighborhoods to the east to transition, in some cases, transition in use, perhaps in form as well. This is an illustration that we made of how some simple streetscape improvements could be made to Brennan to make it a flexible, active neighborhood street. We're illustrating what we call parklets in front of the businesses on on the west side of the street, which are just like we showed on Main and Beach and Lake. There are opportunities to extend the outdoor space to support those businesses on the west side. Similarly, with the east neighborhood, we haven't done any detailed opportunity studies, though we think there are a lot of opportunities in this part of town, in particular with the future of the Martinelli's building and campus really being somewhat open. There could be a big opportunity for that use to transition into something else that would help anchor and activate and support the downtown. There's similarly a number of significant historic homes in this area. The use of those could evolve over time. Those would be great. Bed and breakfasts, tea houses, coffee shops, things like that. That could be a very unique experience in close proximity to the historic core of downtown. Oh, I just went through those, so I'll skip ahead because I think I'm running slow. Similarly, in the west neighborhood, we haven't done any specific illustrations. Here, we think there's a lot of opportunities for context-sensitive infill development. That could be, and that could be, residential only, neighborhood scale, multifamily. In some cases, that could include small bits of commercial, live work, makerspace, and the like. And then the final character area that we're looking at is what we're calling the workplace industrial area. And really this is the area along some of the large industrial sites along Walker Street and focused around the historic train depot. Some of our the placemaking priorities here encourage, incentivize adaptive reuse of vacant and underutilized industrial sites. There's a number of large underutilized industrial sites, some of which are vacant, some of which are just storage yards for materials or trailers, things like that. And we really think that this part of town could be a very unique, cool part of downtown Watsonville, similar to the Funk Zone in Santa Barbara, Arts District in downtown Los Angeles, where it could be a concentration of incubator space, creative offices, maker space, art galleries, breweries, coffee roasters, things that kind of tread the line between industrial and in town. That wouldn't belong necessarily on Main Street, but could very comfortably find a place in this part of town and attract certain user types and residents as well. We think there could be an opportunity for housing in this area as well. So the main idea then would be to really concentrate a critical mass of activity around the historic depot site. And we're going to show you an example of what that could look like. So in the bottom left there, you see the historic depot. Walker Street is in the bottom of the graphic here as well. Sorry, my animation is a little weird. So the basic idea would be take advantage of the industrial building stock that you have in this area and really find ways to thread in active public realm network into as some of these uses may evolve over time. And really what you're creating sort of an incidental open space network by converting, some existing parking lots into outdoor dining terraces and plazas, by making targeted improvements to the street and public realm. We haven't drawn that yet, but we will draw an example down at the street of what this place could look like, in it. But in addition to opportunities to activate some of these industrial uses with much more active users and spaces, there's a number of large infill opportunity sites as well that we think could very comfortably, where housing could very comfortably be inserted into this area, and really allow this southern, this western neighborhood industrial area to sort of blend into its own gritty, fun, active neighborhood environment. So zooming out of that specific illustration, this is just an illustration to show how over time, if you get a critical mass of activity around the historic depot on Walker, this area could really start to evolve into a very active district. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Peter. If you can stop sharing, and I'll start sharing my screen
yes.
again.
Stop share.
Great. Megan, I will.
Great.
You can
take it from here. Great. So I'm going to talk about the street improvements and the bicycle network. And a lot of this was already introduced in the sections that Simran and Peter presented. So I'll try to keep it kind of high level, but just want to tie those quick overviews that were shared earlier in the context of what we're trying to achieve downtown to some of the details of what it takes to implement that. And go ahead to the next slide. Thanks, Simran. So like I said, this is familiar from Simran's overview. Just want to start by recognizing that the downtown streets serve many functions, and this highlights some of the key regional connections, and want to think about how that interfaces with the rest of the downtown streets, and specifically the Caltrans route and the couplet on Lake and Beach. And that configuration, we'll talk a little bit about how that could be changed over time. The Caltrans route, both Caltrans routes pass through downtown and are currently configured as one-way couplet on Lake and Beech Street. And want to think about how those can better support a downtown environment in addition to carrying the through traffic that they currently carry, and consider options to reconfigure as two-way streets. And in thinking about the potential differences between a one-way and a two-way street configuration on Lake and Beach, it's helpful to remember that one-way streets, a multi-lane one-way streets, are all about moving traffic through an area rather than connecting to the neighborhood. And by converting to two-way streets, there are opportunities to slow vehicle speeds, facilitate more direct connections to businesses and emergency services, and to provide bike and pedestrian connections on streets with calmer traffic. So that's what we have in mind as we're going through some of these potential reconfigurations in the next few slides. So starting with Main Street, as Peter discussed earlier, the existing Main Street is fairly wide, but has narrow sidewalks for a downtown district. And so we're looking at opportunities to reconfigure where the additional vehicle lanes might not be necessary, especially the portion that's not part of that Caltrans loop. So Caltrans from Lake onto Main, going north on Main is Caltrans facility, and going south on Main between Lake and Beach to connect to Beach right now, but that northbound segment up until Lake is not a Caltrans not part of that Caltrans configuration. So there are opportunities to reclaim some of that space for pedestrians and businesses. And just a reminder of what Peter showed earlier, on the left, we've got the short-term option, which is a slight reduction in the vehicle right-of-way with that extra lane space that's not necessary for the efficient traffic operations, and expanding the pedestrian realm with parklets. And then on the right, showing the longer term option, how you can formalize some of those short-term design changes and build in more landscape and pedestrian connections to really emphasize the the public realm and make it really feel like an outdoor room, as Peter was saying. Next slide. So this next example, also a reminder of what we already saw a little bit earlier in the presentation on Beech Street. Existing Beech Street is part of the two-way couplet with two very wide eastbound lanes, which favors trucks and high speeds over pedestrians and other people who are moving around without a car. So these are a couple of options for how that could be reconfigured. Just in the short term on the left, simply could narrow the vehicle lanes that are so wide right now, add parklets, and shorten the pedestrian crossing distances using paint and planters. And in that way, help to calm traffic and make the pedestrian environment on those sidewalks and the plaza more inviting and more comfortable. And in the long term, shown on the right, there's an opportunity to perhaps even revisit the Caltrans Route 152 configuration and the one-way couplet loop with Lake, and reconfigure Beach and Lake both into two-way streets. And similar to Maine, bring the painted pedestrian areas and parklets and planters into something more permanent with landscaping and more formal crossings. And in this way, Beach, if there's an opportunity to make Beach a two-way street that is not part of the Caltrans route, then there's most likely significantly lower traffic volumes because it would be all local traffic on Beach instead of the Caltrans through traffic. And so really a chance to emphasize the local connections and change the speeds of traffic on that street. Next slide. And this is showing Lake Street. Again, this is a review since we got to see this already in the context of the downtown core. But just as a reminder, the way Lake is set up right now, similar to Beach, it is part of the one-way couplet. It has very wide travel lanes and there's some parking and narrow sidewalks. And so these two images illustrate that over on the left in the short term, could use similar traffic calming strategies as on Main and Beach with narrower vehicle lanes and a buffer between parked cars and moving cars to help improve the pedestrian environment, make it easier for people who are parking on the street, and take some of that on-street space for planters to help visually reinforce the downtown setting and the pedestrian experience. So all of this can be done even if Lake remains a one-way, two-lane street as part of the Caltrans couplet and key piece of 152. And those kinds of improvements could be made more long-term and more formal in the long term with additional planting and pedestrian treatments at crossings. And then over on the right side, you can see a potential long-term, and this little pop-up here, you can see how in the long term, if Lake could become a two-way street and the Caltrans traffic would be consolidated onto Lake and no longer routing the eastbound traffic onto Beach, then it might be necessary to have left turn pockets at the intersections, and there would have to be more analysis of other access needs along this corridor outside of the intersections to figure out if that has to continue through the blocks for side streets or driveways. But you can see that there's an opportunity simply to remove parking or to consolidate parking to one side where left turn pockets are needed, and then make sure that there's room for all the turning movements and also for that through traffic that's part of that relies on the Caltrans route. And in that way, just generally able to have the street that functions more like a downtown street while still serving that Caltrans need. And so on this slide, again, some familiar imagery here, thinking about other downtown and neighborhood streets outside of those primary arterial corridors, and specifically Brennan and Union and Maple and Second, Brennan and Union, which runs parallel to Main Street, Maple and Second, which runs east-west, and Beech outside of the couplet, especially to the west of Main. These are these, among other streets, tie into the downtown and the surrounding residential neighborhoods, and each street has a slightly different mix of overall dimensions and on-street parking and civic and commercial uses. So the design recommendations would vary from street to street and maybe even from block to block in some cases. And we can talk a little bit about how that might fit in with the bicycle network in just a few more slides. But the overall approach to these streets is to address the pedestrian needs, maintain residential parking, and identify opportunities for off-street commercial parking. And with those kind of key right-of-way configuration framework needs in mind, build in traffic calming designs into the streetscape so the streets also can serve as meaningful bike connections and bring an all ages and abilities network into the downtown core. So like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next set of slides. And next slide. So the last key street that we wanted to call out in the downtown network before I switch over to the bike map is Walker. And as it exists right now, it is an important or kind of primary truck route, and the right-of-way is really dominated by truck access, especially serving the industrial uses that are in place right now. And there are very narrow sidewalks and bike lanes. And so in the long term, Walker has already been identified as part of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail. And the emphasis here that is to note that Walker really presents an opportunity to expand a continuous regional network. And the specific design could change to dedicate more space to pedestrians and bikes. For example, depending on development along Walker, there may be opportunities to accommodate parking off street. So there's more right of way to dedicate to bike lanes or to more separated bike lanes. So there's lots of possibilities along here that could be designed specifically to respond to the development that Peter was just describing. Next slide. So the next few slides, I'll talk about the bike network and bike facilities and how we can fit bike facilities and connect to the rest of the citywide and regional network in downtown. You know, I'm going through this fairly quickly. The last few slides were all a little bit of a review, and so I'll slow down a bit here to make sure that we're covering all the basics. And this is definitely something that we can talk about more in the discussion afterwards. So this is a quick primer and visual reminder about some of the bike route types and the labeling conventions that we use. So moving counterclockwise from the top left corner, just kind of going in an almost numerical order. Class 1 bike routes are bike paths that are separated multi-use paths. Right below that, we've got Class 2 bike routes or bike lanes. That refers to an on-street lane. There are varying widths. Sometimes they come with a painted buffer. To the right of that is a Class 4 bike lane and or separated bikeway. or cycle track sometimes, and is sometimes how they're referred to. And those are more substantially separated bike lanes. Sometimes they're grade separated, as in they're the same level as the sidewalk instead of the same level as the street, or they can be buffered by parked cars, as you can see in the photo here, or by planters and other kind of vertical separations. And then finally, moving back up to the top right corner here, we've got class 3, which it refers to a bike route that comes in many forms. Most simply, it just means that it's a designated bike route and it shares the right of way with vehicles. And there are a lot of different ways to make that part of the bike network that I'll talk about in the next few slides. So next slide. This map, once it's loaded on the screen, here we go, shows the existing bike network. And I want to just call out a few details here. The solid green lines on this map are designated class 3, which means shared right of way, as I just mentioned in the last slide, but they're not marked with on-street signage or pavement markings. And the dashed green line indicates streets that have sharrows, which are pavement markings that are intended to serve as a reminder to both people who are riding bikes and people who are driving that the lane is meant to be shared between both cars and bikes. And a key takeaway here is that the existing network is mostly north-south bike lanes on Walker and Rodriguez, or unmarked shared right-of-way on high-speed, high-volume streets that are also part of the Caltrans routes. So there's a lot of opportunity here to adjust the bike network and make it feel more inviting and comfortable for people of all ages and abilities. And the next slide shows some of the potential opportunities here. So on this map, which shows the proposed, we're really looking for ways to connect the citywide bike network to the downtown core and to establish comfortable north-south and east-west connections within this area. So on this map, the solid lines show the elements of the existing network that we recommend maintaining. And the dashed lines illustrate opportunities to expand the bike network, or excuse me, take a new approach. So a few things to point out. Of course, we could spend more time examining this, but want to make sure that there's an opportunity to discuss. So just a few key things to point out here. With some very small additions, both Rodriguez and Walker could connect directly to the Pajaro Levee Trail. So you can see that over on the right edge of the map. Brennan and Union are too narrow and include some residential parking, which we assume is less flexible than commercial parking, just as a kind of general approach to thinking about street right of way and how space is allocated. So we don't consider Brennan and Union to be wide enough to accommodate a designated class 2 bike lane or a painted bike lane that's not a shared right of way. However, those are narrower neighborhood streets and can serve as the north-south route east of Main with traffic calming designs that would reinforce low speeds and volumes, and also intersection treatments to really support bike access across the main east-west arterials like Main and like Lake and Beach rather. And so even without dedicated right of way on those streets, we do think that there are some good opportunities to make that a meaningful part of the bicycle network. And then in thinking about the east-west connections across and into downtown, we're recommending a mix of both class 2 and enhanced class 3. So again, class 2 being the painted bike lanes and class 3 being the shared right of way. And many of the east-west streets are also quite narrow. And so for the most part, the only way to add class 2 dedicated lanes is to remove parking. And as I mentioned, that's easier to do on blocks with off-street parking that where commercial parking can be consolidated off-street, but it's more intrusive on streets with residential parking. So that's something that we had in mind on the blocks that are primarily residential. We don't assume that that parking is very flexible, but there are a few blocks where there could be a dedicated bike lane and then transition to a shared right of way on the connecting streets that get a little bit further to the east and to the west. And also wanted to point out that we highlighted one opportunity to enhance the Rodriguez Street bike lane on the block between Lake and Beach, where there might be enough space to expand to a class 4 or that additional separated bike lane with additional buffer. And we would really focus on this block on intersection treatments throughout or on connections, for a class 4 buffered bike lane. We would focus on intersection treatments, and the same goes throughout the downtown street network, so that the bike lanes really function as part of an integrated and connected network. And then the final slide shows some examples of how we can achieve enhanced class, when I talk about class 3 and low volume and low speed streets. This is just a couple of examples. There are lots of different design options to help keep traffic calm on streets that are intended to be used by as part of the bike network. But for example, narrowing the pedestrian crossing at intersections and just generally making sure that the street is not wider than it needs to be to accommodate vehicle traffic helps to calm traffic and helps to prevent people driving from speeding through intersections too quickly. And there are also opportunities to put some small little right-of-way narrowing designs into the street at mid-block that help to remind drivers to slow down and be really aware of the space that they're taking up. So those are the kinds of designs that could be sprinkled in on some of those side streets to support the east-west and north-south connections on that proposed bike network. And that is it for my slides.
Thank you, Megan. That was a lot of information that we all collectively presented. So before we break out into small groups, I wanted to see if there were any questions that folks had that we could answer before, that everyone would benefit from with regard to the presentation. If there are comments to offer, I'd like you to hold those till we are in the small groups, and you can share those there. So if you want to raise your hands, Judy, and then Steve.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. I want to highlight to Peter what is very unique and important about Watsonville. This is a working town. There are 4,000 semi-trucks that leave Watsonville to deliver food elsewhere every single day. The area in the back, the light industrial area, I forget what zone it is, those cooling, do you know what I'm talking about? Those cooling,
yes, the workplace industrial. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those cooling places are active. That is the highlight of this town. Rather than turn it into a gathering place for working individuals, these are the people that are supporting the rest of the infrastructure of the whole Bay Area, to highlight their activity as workers. And the second point is that the depot is owned by the Driscoll Ryder family. And have you contacted them about turning it into a civic property? Is there any hope in that, or where do you sit with that? So my point is, this is a working town. Honor and raise up that community as opposed to turn it into a everywhere USA town. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Steve, do you have a question?
Well, first of all, I want to say I completely agree with Judy. And I want to relate a quick incident. I was approached in traffic at El Pollero at 129 and Main. And a man said, "I've heard all about your beaches." He rolled down the window and said, "All right, how do you get to the beach?" We need to have, if we're really going to promote our beautiful beaches, Manresa and Sunset, can we put some real signs that give the mileage, destination, and where when you're in downtown to go to the beach? Because we have fabulous beaches. The LA Times did an article, the travel letter 2 years ago, extolling the beauty of Sunset and Manresa beaches. And if we want to make, tourism dollars from our new hotels, folks, we need to get people up here to eat in our lovely, wonderful restaurants, shop at our beautiful markets and stores, go to our lovely beaches and have a great time. And when they go home, say, Watsonville is a fabulous place to visit. Because, folks, we need to count on tourism as well. But, yes, agriculture is the big deal. And like Judy said, all those trucks leave that area right 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's like practically a convoy. We're feeding the world, folks, and we should be proud of it. Look at the beautiful stuff we send out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm not seeing any more raised hands. So what we'd like to do now is break the relatively small group into 3 smaller groups so we can have a more spirited discussion in those smaller settings. We do have translation available. So first I wanted to do a show of hands if anyone wants to be in a group which has Spanish translation available. So if you do, if you can raise your hand, you'll get allocated to that group first, and then we'll divide the rest of the groups into smaller groups. Carlos, did you want to announce that? Or Elena, since Carlos is in the interpretation room, do you mind announcing that as well?
I believe they are receiving that feed in Spanish, so they're
Okay.
able to hear Carlos translate that portion. But in case there's anyone on this channel, ahora vamos a dividirnos en grupos. Si está interesado en ser agregado al grupo en español, favor de levantar el icono de la manita que ve en su pantalla en la parte superior.
Thank you, Elena. I'm not seeing any raised hands here. So, Elena, you're going to start setting up the breakout rooms and allocating folks. It'll be done randomly. So,
Simran,
give us a minute or two.
do you want me to respond real quick to Judy and to Steve's comments?
Sure. Why don't you respond while Elena is sending folks off?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you both for both of those comments. Part of the purpose of bringing these ideas to you as a community is you obviously know your community much better than we do. So none of these are, and sometimes we reiterate this point at the beginning of presentations, none of these are they're certainly not development proposals, and none of these ideas are proposals that we're trying to sell you on. Really, we're bringing some of the opportunities that we've observed or thought of to you for feedback. And if we've missed the mark, then we certainly want to adjust those and have the opportunity to work with you to refine them, based on what the real needs of this community are. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And, Steve and Judy, the small groups you're in, feel free to share more of your thoughts about what you heard, as well as your ideas of what you would recommend instead. And Elena, whenever you're ready.
Will this be 30 minutes, Simran?
Looking at the time, we have about 40 minutes.
Okay, 40?
40.
All right. I will send you off to breakout rooms now.
Thank you.
Ready? All righty.
See you all in the rooms and back in about 40 minutes.
So I think, Peter, we have our breakout room in what appears to be the main room. So that will work out just fine. Welcome, everyone.
Okay.
I'm Justin Meek. Peter and I will be facilitating this conversation with you all, gather more of your thoughts and responses to the information shared and your general vision for the future of Watsonville, both as we're just talking about around Walker Street, and I'm sure you may have other thoughts and ideas about Maine and some other things that were shared. And if there's anything else that was missed and you would like to touch on that too, we'd love to hear from you. So let me also transition over to Peter to make a few open remarks, and then we want to have a nice spirited conversation with all of you tonight.
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Okay. So can everybody see that now?
Perfect. Yeah, here's the questions to help direct our conversation. First, thinking in terms of the character areas and then the street network. In terms of the character areas, one of the things we thought we'd help with getting your thoughts were looking at priorities for placemaking and some of the opportunities that were discussed tonight that reflect the community's vision and priorities for downtown, and wondering whether or not you agree with that sentiment or if there's anything perhaps missing that from what was shared tonight.
Perfect segue. Yeah, so really this forum can be open to whatever anybody is most interested in discussing. But yeah, we want to know general feedback on the ideas we've shown you, and certainly if we've missed things, then let's talk about them. And I can jump around anywhere in the presentation if anybody would like to revisit any of the ideas that we shared or talked about.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, there's not another way to show the raise the hand, so I do appreciate it. I understand that there's the Monterey Bay rail program that we're talking about with that. Sorry, it's coming up on 7, but has it been thought of as part of that program, which is separate from this, to use the depot that has been pointed out, Driscoll's has, as the station for Watsonville? I mean, it's already on the line where they're going to put the train line through. And from the standpoint of, I mean, I understand the desire to want to put something there, but to get people from there, you got to traverse a portion of the city that other people are not going to say, I want to walk to go to downtown to do. Is that been looked at as a joint thing? Where are they planning on putting the station? Because they're planning on putting a stop in Watsonville.
Peter, if you want to put the graphic that showed sort of the makerspace area, you're right. The former depot is right across the street from the boundary of our specific plans. The specific plan boundary terminates at Walker Street. And so we are thinking in terms of the types of land uses downtown and that transition in a westerly direction as you go down Beech and Lake towards Walker. And so we're looking at potential infill development, particularly along Walker Street on the eastern side, but also showing the historic depot, and just for illustrative purposes, what could happen. It's not actually a part of the specific plan itself, but this would be an example of how it could take advantage of that depot were to be reactivated as the train stop for passenger rail.
I understand that, but I'm saying the city, or correction, the Monterey Rail program, right, and part of the Rail to Trail program already has a planned stop. I think the Rail to Trail right now is supposed to end in Watsonville as we go up north out of here. And there's a plan to continue down into Monterey. But where is that plan to stop?
This was one of the stops that, which is one of the potential locations that was identified. There, I think, was another potential location that was a little bit further to the west, near the intersection near Ohlone, near Beech Street. And of course, then another connecting point would be across the river in also, someone else wants to join us, in Pajaro, of course, as well, which would then, as you're mentioning, provide a connection to the wider region, both to the north and south, both towards Salinas and then north towards Gilroy for that rail project.
Okay, thank you. I know Mary had a question, so I'll stop with any follow-ups there and another person asked.
And before, because I just want to welcome, looks like we have two new members, Rabbi Debbie Israel, and I didn't catch the other person's name who just joined. Just want to acknowledge them joining our group at the moment.
Am I on?
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
Okay. First of all, I want to absolutely compliment the work that's put into this. And so far, I love everything. I grew up in Santa Cruz, but I've only moved to Watsonville for the last 3 years. And I'm a bike rider and a walker. And to be honest, I go into Santa Cruz or Monterey because I don't feel it's very user-friendly here. I decided to go support the downtown businesses, and I was so overwhelmed by the traffic, couldn't even see what was down there. So I think all of these are fabulous proposals, and it gives me great hope for this little city. But one thing I don't quite understand. I do understand that it's a farming community. We moved to the Santa Cruz County in 1956, so I've seen all the changes, but I don't understand why this would impact any kind of negative impact on the workers of Watsonville. Did I misunderstand that they think that would be a negative impact? That was
I think so. The concern I heard with regard to some of the opportunities we explored in this Southwest industrial area, and perhaps I didn't communicate this clearly enough when I presented, but the idea certainly is not to push out industrial out of this area. It was simply looking at the opportunity that exists with the historic depot there, and just observing that there's a lot of fairly significant underutilized pieces, in addition to the very active and very well utilized industrial pieces in this area. There could be an opportunity to make some additions to this environment, both in terms of public realm improvements and potentially some of the less active, maybe less successful users in this areas might evolve and use to some other things that could belong very well in a very active downtown like this, including in there could be opportunities to insert housing in this area. Again, this isn't a proposal for such. It's simply to say, as this area changes over time, here's how it could be an active, integral part of the downtown environment, and this could be, this could be its own type of environment for the workers in some of these big industrial uses as well.
And in terms of the feasibility of the bicycle and pedestrian recommendations that we're looking at here, and particularly in this area, that's not going to limit the technical feasibility of truck turning movements and freight goods movement delivery, things like that. We're not really looking at restricting lane widths or necessarily squaring off intersections. I think the concern here is mainly just in terms of maybe some potential redevelopment around land uses, but obviously the truck movements are something we'll consider as we get closer to actual design of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, but I don't think that should be a concern from that aspect.
Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on it, but this is envisions to continue to be a truck route.
Yep.
Is there anybody else we haven't heard from that would like to share their thoughts? Whether Rabbi or Sylvia, I'd love to hear your views as well.
This is Sylvia. So I got a lot of information from people and they really like the idea of the plot at the depot section on Walker Street. One of the reasons I don't go by there is because there are no sidewalks. And it's not very accessible, especially for anyone that has use of a wheelchair. I never thought about access until I became a user of a wheelchair. So there's parts here in downtown that need, we need to start thinking about universal design as well, just to make sure that, we're thinking about everybody. The other part of it is that, we do have the big city blocks, so we do need to add more crosswalks. And it's very difficult to want to go to a certain section and you actually have to go around the block. Unfortunately, right now we have sidewalks that don't work on Kilburn Street. We have poles on 4th Street that are not accessible for people in wheelchairs. We have potholes on streets. So in addition to everything that we've talked about, everyone loves the ideas, especially in the Gottschalks area, to make it more beautiful and accessible and for pedestrians. The alleyways that you talked about behind Bank of America is definitely a very good idea. It used to be accessible where you were able to go from 5th Street to Westlake.
Yep.
Until they closed it down on that one area.
Right.
And so there are many areas there that will definitely work for a lot of people. There is one person that told me I had to quote him, and I will do that if that's okay with you. And this is on the Civic area. So this is what he said. His name is David and Nancy in the Almond District area. Sure, move the PD to a smaller building. So the idea is already there. Want super high density apartments in downtown Watsonville? All low income rental or homes and the more affluent people will move out of California. Read what planners who knows where they live, I doubt they live here, want to stick in downtown. Too bad the city does not consider the huge additional infrastructure needed to support all the couple thousand new people that are going to be living here. Make a rule. These people cannot have a car or pickup. No motorcycles either. No one with a felony record in the last 5 years. So what's happening is that a lot of people are saying there is no parking, and we already have a lot of issues with parking right now. So with all the new housing and developments that are going to be going up, the question is, where are the parking lots? Where are we going to park all the new people that are coming in? And definitely, one person said we need businesses that are lacking in Watsonville to fill the essential services needed. And I think with all the development and the ideas that are in this will definitely help achieve that. And there was a section on Beech on the two-way when you were talking about the Highway 129 and 152. A lot of people like that idea as well. Just want to comment on that. And that'll be it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it certainly changes your perspective when you're limited with mobility in a very much more minor experience that I had. I was a couple of weeks, I I had an ankle surgery, so I was riding around. I was using one of those knee scooter carts to get to work downtown. So I was taking transit down from Pasadena to Los Angeles and then trying to navigate my way through. And it certainly changed my perspective as an urbanist, not being somebody that would typically be looking through the lens of those with accessibility needs, to understand the obstacles, the very real obstacles that are in place when those accessibility issues are not designed for. So I appreciate that perspective.
Mhm.
Looks like we also have a few more hands up as well. Let's see. McKenna, have you had a chance to speak? If you wouldn't mind unmuting, and go ahead.
Hi, thank you. And I want to thank Sylvia for bringing up accessibility again. I think that is so important, and really part of the reason why I think the idea of wider sidewalks would be really amazing. I walk like 5 blocks-ish from my work to the bus, and yeah, the sidewalks being so narrow puts me really close to a lot of cars that are often going really fast. And, you know, there are a lot of pedestrians, and, you know, it's not super comfortable, you know, squeezing by people on super narrow sidewalks. I also wanted to mention that I work with youth, and for a lot of them, they walk to school, to work, and they have mentioned to me before, you know, the need for greater safety when they're doing their pedestrian thing, in terms of like streetlights, feeling really safe from the traffic. I so frequently see drivers failing to stop for pedestrians, not giving them the right of way, not stopping behind the line. And I think that those protective bumpers that I saw on a lot of the curves, I think those would be really helpful for that. Providing people with more space to walk, I think providing a lot of thoroughfares through these really large blocks is really amazing, really helpful, and will help students and all pedestrians really cut through to get where they're going quicker. Yeah, I find that all really wonderful. And I just wanted to highlight, I hear from you so frequently that they're hoping for more opportunities for fun in the downtown area. For many of them, the farmers market at the Placida is their favorite place, their social place. And so I just want to highlight their experience with that, and that it would be really wonderful for them to have greater opportunities in the downtown area and have greater walkability of the area where they go to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I appreciate the comments on the providing particularly a pedestrian network that serves everyone and doesn't create barriers. And also the comments from what I heard on widening sidewalks and making it more inviting and walker-friendly place in general. So is there any other comments that people want to share? Peter, could you also bring up the slide with the topic areas?
Yeah.
And because we've kind of blended a little bit in terms of some of the character areas, the opportunity sites. We've also talked a little bit about the transportation network, particularly around pedestrians. Just want to make sure if there's anything else that might spur on our conversation that we can touch on next. So that slide with the questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about the street network just now in terms of making sure it's balanced for all potential users, and particularly not to create barriers. I won't pretend like I have had the same challenges, other than once as a young man had a very major injury that put me in crutches for some time. So likewise getting a sense of what it's like to be having difficulty getting around and having that stick with you for the rest of your life is something that I can appreciate, even though and of course trying to navigate streets with kids in wheelchairs is never easy. But let's move on to other topics, maybe on the bicycle network and the proposed network. If anyone had any responses to that, any feelings, any thoughts on what was presented on that front, we'd love to hear from you on that too.
This is Michael. For the bicycle network, I really like it. I like the areas where it's more separate, especially with small kids. Downtown right now, even though it has those sharrows in there, I won't put my kids on the road. It's just not a risk I'm willing to take for that. Unfortunately, that puts me on the sidewalk. And then anybody that has mobility issues knows that those sidewalks are very thin. And then I'm trying to pass when we're walking our bikes, or there's lots of people out there. Those sidewalks are just not designed for that. So they really do. I mean, I like the green on the trees, but those holes where the trees are take up a lot of space, right? And it creates some crowding. So if that could be addressed, in also creating a safe space for the bicycles, because especially with smaller kids and drivers either not knowing the law, not caring about the law, or just not paying attention. One reason why I don't like to bring my kids downtown, which we do like going down, like the farmer's market is great, right? It's an example of what you want to be doing in downtown. But I don't want to ride my bike down there because it's not safe for me to take my kids down there. And so if that could be more along that individual lane where they're potentially separate from the traffic, but it doesn't push us onto the sidewalk, that would be great. And a little side note, there are other bike rails or bike paths, but as like Mr. Trio pointed out with the beaches, right? Beach is a horrible street to drive on with no sidewalks. And if we want to have people come visit downtown, and I realize it's site specific, but they could ride their bikes to these places. And I realize it would be a whole nother outlay of stuff and looking at, but you can't have an area that's great and then it ends with like nothing. That's that proverbial bridge to nowhere, and that doesn't help anybody for what else we're trying to accomplish with the downtown stuff. Thank you.
Would you mind, Peter, bring up the proposed bike map, just as a graphic, just so we can have a look at. And so what I'm hearing is, the difficulty with being able to make your way through and around downtown. And obviously, I don't know where you live, you don't have to share, but getting to the plaza area, it sounds like it could be a challenge, and feeling the presence of traffic, and being particularly concerned about your children and their safety as you try to make it to and from. The network that you see here, do you think that provides an enhancement to so again, just to orient yourself?
I think it would be better. I mean, like
blue would be bike lanes, and
right. So like I come from the area over by the Target, right? Okay. And so there's a bike path over there. It's great, and there's bike trails, which keeps me off the sidewalks. There is some joint sidewalk bike path area there, and because it's depicted as a bike lane and a sidewalk, that could potentially run into problems if there's too many people or people just taking up too much space. People just not paying attention, or the fact of mobility that, hey, we have to have a wheelchair, right? As an example, just because of size. They need that space, but it's a dual shared space, but the sidewalk isn't wide enough for that. And if you get towards Main Street, and from basically where the church is and the Catholic school is at the far end down there, down to Main Street, it's a perfect way to get down there. That would provide that nicely. But part of my concern is, even though you have these bike lanes on some of these other areas, if you were to limit traffic down to one lane, which does streamline and create a lot more safer safer access for pedestrians crossing the streets, hopefully that people pay more attention, as well as for bicycles. But then you push the traffic to the other streets, right? Because you still have the cars. And so that's what I'm saying. If there could be a dedicated bike lane where it's a little more split from the traffic, whether it's has the safety area, it's painted green, you know, something to draw attention. Because as much as I appreciate the safety and the security of the sidewalks, I would prefer not to be on the sidewalks, because that's another set of problems with people who need the sidewalks, pedestrians, and people coming in and out of businesses. And so I'd rather be in a designated lane, but I don't, you know, it needs to have that safety network within there. And that trail, that bike path trail is on that red that goes pretty much right in front of the Catholic, and then it just dead ends right into a sidewalk. And then I go into Sharrows. It goes into Sharrows right now, and that's just not, that doesn't work. So if you could, that stretch of Main Street from there down could do something to put a bike lane, not necessarily a Sharrow down there, that would help me not be on the sidewalks.
Once you round the corner on Main Street and towards downtown, it obviously is 4 lanes. There's not a lot of shoulder, and there's traffic. So I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, thank you.
We've got a few minutes time left. I want to make sure we hear from everybody. Tony, looks like you have your hand up. Would you mind?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Justin? Everyone?
Go ahead, please.
Cool. Hey, Justin. This is Tony Nunez. I'm taking my reporter hat off here and just talking to you as a City of Watsonville resident.
Very
totally agree with what the last speaker just said in terms of building not only the bicycle access and improvements in downtown, but also thinking about how we can improve kind of how other people flow into downtown from other areas of the city. I really like that idea because, you know, I live out toward Freedom in that area, in the District 6 area. So I'll be coming in down through Callahan Park or something like that with a bike. You know, the Pajaronian offices are in downtown Watsonville. I'd love to be able to ride my bike, you know, into Watsonville that way. At least just, you know, extending out those bike lanes so that, you know, people from outside of the downtown can make their way into downtown on those Fridays to go out to, you know, whatever it might be. Hopefully, you know, in the future, something, you know, a little different than the farmer's market, even though that's a lot of fun to go to on Fridays. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I really like how this bicycle network is laid out in the fact that I think that it really lends itself to young people coming from wherever they might be living around the downtown area. You know, I myself grew up on Rodriguez Street and went to, you know, several schools throughout this area. And just being able to get around on bike safely and to be protected when you're making your way from, say, I don't know, from like Rodriguez Street to like Watsonville High School on a bicycle. I know that, you know, like the previous speaker was saying, most of the time, you know, when I was a kid, just getting to school, you're on the sidewalk just because there's, you know, the bicycle infrastructure isn't correct for, you know, for someone, you know, just trying to get to school. So I know that there's obviously the charter school going into downtown and you know, other schools around the area there too. But I really like how this proposed bicycle network is laid out for young people, because, you know, I think that's really where it's going to go in the future is, you know, if you get the young people on their bikes and having them understand that they could get from point A to point B on their bicycle and feel safe, you know, that really builds, I guess, that connection for the rest of their life. You know, I don't know how much that's going to change for me or for anyone, people older than myself or whatever it might be, but young people get comfortable on their bike, you know, they'll ride it for the rest of their lives, and especially if they stick around in the city, which is, you know, definitely something we want them to do. So thank you.
And indeed, full disclosure, when I used to ride with my 5-year-old, I sometimes put him on the sidewalk. Now that he's 7, he rides with me in the street, but it's still sometimes harrowing. So I can appreciate those comments. And hopefully this network makes sense, because as you can see, what we're trying to envision was directing bicycle traffic on roads that have fewer cars, one, but still provided east-west and north-south connections, so they were still permeable at the same time. And that's the idea that we were working with, and looking at the trade-offs of how much right-of-way is available if we want to do, widening sidewalks or adding bike lanes, and knowing that you can't do it at all. So this is our proposal, and again, hopefully it makes sense, but wanted to check in to see if anything seemed amiss or if it could be approved upon at the same time.
Yeah, I really like the feeding in from the multiple side streets that the network feeds into from Freedom, like off of Sutton and off of Brennan. That makes so much sense, to start that off there for people who are coming in from Freedom Boulevard, just to be able to get off at any one of those side streets and to have, their own bike lane, so they can get around to whatever it might be, right? Whether it's to Watsonville High School or whether it's to Downtown Plaza, whatever it might be, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Well, we've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to check in to see anyone else we haven't heard from or has something else that's a hot topic that they hadn't brought up yet, but want to make sure we get a chance to talk about it right now. I do see that Mary hand is still up, but maybe that was just left over from before.
No, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, I would like to mention, I understand about the families and stuff, but I will tell you there's a huge movement with seniors and electric bikes. Huge, all over Santa Cruz. I think every other bike you see is electric and a senior. And I know if you wanted to look at what I think would be a cost-effective bike lane is down on Beech Street. They just have a bike lane with some big, like, little barriers laid out there, almost like speed bumps, plastic speed bumps. And I feel really safe riding down there with the Beech Street traffic. So I wanted to say that. And the other thing I want to say is I agree with the Beech Street. That road to the beach there is crazy. It's not only is the road needing deferred maintenance, but they haul down there. I mean, there's no way I'd ride my bike, and I'm only 5 minutes from Sunset Beach. I would love to ride down there, but there's not a chance. So that would be something I agree that we could really promote Watsonville beaches as well. Then I just have one last quick question, and that's, forgive me if it's ignorant because I just moved here, but do we have control of all of Main Street, or is the Fed or the state involved in that?
No, just two comments. One, beach, most of beach, particularly as you head past the highways, of course, in the county. And I agree that's in dire need of improvement, but would have to be through the county. And likewise, most of Main Street is a Caltrans facility. Once you, as shown here in the red and blue, that's all Caltrans. And so as you round the corner at Freedom and continue down toward Lake and then Beach, that's part of State Route 152. And the blue portion is the portion that's a couplet where it's one way as you go up Beach to Lincoln and then Lake. So any roadway improvements must go through Caltrans. And so staff has been in communication with our counterparts at the state to talk through about potential improvements, all of which we've seen here, we've shared with them to get their feedback to make sure that they're on board or at least wouldn't be opposed to what we're talking about. And so far, the close conversations have been positive. You can imagine that to turn this into a capital improvement project with Caltrans is a long process. And so, but if we, but at the same time, we're wanting to check with our community and then communicate that back with the state on this is what our preferences are, and please work with us. And if in doing so, potentially a lot of these improvements could be funded through state funding rather than local general funds or other funding.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. All right, we got less than 5 minutes. We got probably time for one or two more questions or comments on any of the topics we talk about, whether it's the transportation networks or the infill sites, the overall character areas, and where's areas we're thinking that there might be opportunity for infill, or the type of activities that could occur, whether we're talking about the Civic Corps or some of the surrounding areas. Just open up to your thoughts.
Steve has a hand up.
Justin,
Oh, go ahead.
And we have
I think that's someone on a call right now. Go ahead.
yeah, but I'll wait. Let me know when
No.
I'm able to speak.
No, this is a good time. Go ahead.
So I just I think it's wonderful that we're having this conversation. That you my name is Martha. I am a resident of Watsonville, and I appreciate all the input that you've received through the community and the meetings that you've held, and that you're able to incorporate different voices and that you've made the space for today. I don't know if anybody's mentioned, but I think there was a topic of discussion with Caltrans grant in hopefully bringing an electrical passenger rail. So hopefully also allowing for that space, you know, to hopefully have that as Monterey County is working on bridging the electric passenger rail system from Pajaro to Monterey. And it would be beautiful if we were able to have it incorporated from Pajaro through Watsonville, and in hopes to have it go to Santa Cruz as it used to be over 100 years ago. It would be a dream come true for me, but also know that sometimes things take time, planning and money, and hopefully I'm able to see it happen. But being able to think of different generations, the youth, young children to adults, and also our elders, right? Not everyone's going to be able to bike ride, not everyone's going to be able to drive. So having different forms of transportation, I think it's ideal as we move and have spaces and adequate parking, garages, and I know housing is important, but also, you know, I guess space for different organizations and companies to come in, as well as to be able to not have be stuck in traffic and be able to go to the beach and have possibly a bike lane to bike ride to the beach on Beech Street. It's not wide enough, and maybe working with I don't know, the county and other organizations, so we're able to expand what we have. That's all.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, that covered a lot of grounds, both connecting into and out of downtown. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I realize we have about a minute left. I just want to acknowledge everyone taking their time out of their day to join us and participate in this workshop. This has been very helpful. I don't know if Peter, if you had a few remarks with just 45 seconds left as well, as we are about to join the wider group. There'd be an opportunity to have a breakout section and share what we discussed. So there'll be more opportunities for talking, but let me stop there and give Peter just 30 seconds.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, thank you very much to all of you for all of your input on this. Certainly on the circulation network. You know, we are absolutely pro bike and human circulation, and we're looking for ways to best enhance that network throughout the downtown. I mean, that's really the one of the fundamentals of any successful urban place, is that it's easy, safe, and comfortable for all user types to get around. So we'll continue. I mean, we've been working very hard trying to balance priorities in terms of how bicycle network could layer into your downtown. It's challenging because there's a number of constraints with regard to dimensions of existing streets and the Caltrans routes going through town, and there's constraints with threading pedestrian network through some of these large blocks. Yeah, just wanted to reiterate, we're working very hard to address all of those things, and I hope that as we continue in this process, we'll be able to show you some more ideas about how that might come to fruition.
Very good. And I think most people are rejoining the main group here. It looks like the other, there's one breakout group that hasn't quite come back, but I think it looks like we're almost all back together. Let me just get a chance for everyone to rejoin and then we'll reconvene.
Thanks, Justin. Group 2 is back.
Excellent.
I think we're still waiting for one more group.
Let's see.
I think we have everyone.
Okay.
All right. So I hope there were fruitful discussions in all the groups. We'd love to hear some report backs. Who was group 1? Who was the leader? And
yeah, I would say that was Peter and myself. We seemingly were just remained in the main group without going into a breakout group, but we had our own little subset. And Peter, feel free, but I think the main things that we talked on particularly was around the road network. First, looking at Walker Street, some of the potential infill development around there, and thinking through the possible connection and reactivation of the rail line and a train station there, or perhaps somewhere else. And then building off that conversation of looking at the fact that Walker Street is not accessible. Now there's no sidewalks. And then noting that other parts of downtown and nearby also aren't accessible, and transitioning to conversation about the overall walkability and focusing on Main Street. But then having more of a conversation looking at the bike network as well and providing connections east-west. We brought up the map and looked at how we're providing north-south connections, and some commented on liking the proposed network from Sutton and Brennan and how that would funnel into downtown. Others talked about some of the challenges as they come on 152 off Main Street and running into downtown, how that basically puts you in a situation where you're sharing space with traffic and how that doesn't feel comfortable. So there was a little bit of a conversation on both those fronts. I'm sure I'm missing a few things. Peter, is there a couple other points that you should highlight as well?
Yeah, no, that's a good summary. I think probably the best summary phrase is one that Megan's used a number of times, but it's just the all users, all abilities network, and that extends to not only bicycle network but pedestrian network as well. We talked a lot about those with accessibility issues and just how it's challenging given the current urban patterns of downtown, and some of the facilities. It's difficult to currently to get through blocks. So circulation really just happens on the perimeters of blocks. So that's why, as a team, we're really looking at how do we thread in and extend and improve and enhance that circulation network of all users and all user types into the downtown, so that it's safe, it's fun, it's active to get around, to get there, and to be there.
thank you, Peter and Justin. Susie, you were in a group with Kelsey and Zach.
Yes.
Who's reporting back for you?
We were having such a great discussion. We forgot to, Gina. Yes. Go for it.
I can report. I'm not my video, but I'm going to report out. We had a really great discussion. Ellie contributed quite a bit. She actually met between the last two meetings.
Gina?
Sorry, Gina, I think your bandwidth might be a little low right now.
A student group, and they had some really good input. Yep, I can. I'll just.
Sorry,
type
we
them
can't
up.
hear you very well.
All right.
Yeah, I'll type them up.
It's the share filter on.
Anyone else from our group want to give a summary? No? Okay. You sure? Okay, how about I'll do it really quick, and then if I miss anything. Okay. All right, let's see. So we talked about, let's see, Ellie had mentioned she had talked to some high school students. They talked about liking the parking structure behind Plaza Vigil, providing open spaces for food trucks, and making sure that we're really adding amenities for students so that they can walk from Watsonville High during lunchtime. Also providing seating and dining and outdoor spaces. We had a lot of agreement about not changing the flavor of what Watsonville is, that this is a working class community, and not try to make it anywhere else, to kind of elevate what Watsonville is and not change it. Let's see. Also brought up, Karina, more recreational areas, green spaces, urban farming, the idea of green roofs, and kind of the bringing in the elements of the climate action plan and really fighting climate change as we're doing these things in the downtown. Again, working on, build on our strengths. Not a lot of discussion on the bike safety and the bike network, and making sure that the bikeways that we're creating through the downtown are as safe as possible for our biking community. Celebrate and elevate Cabrillo and the nonprofits in the downtown. Maria Elena let us know that just her organization alone brings in 10,000 people, 10,000 pedestrians into the downtown a year. Build housing at all income levels. That includes low income housing, not just affordable housing. Look at providing more parking, both free and paid parking. Questions about what the benefit is to making beach and lake two-way versus one-way, and do something with the Fox Theater, the Depot building, and did I miss anything? Judy.
I have one more thing, and this is sort of formed, and I told you this, Justin. I think that Watsonville ought to find one piece of land and put out a call for a magnificent high-end, not high-end, adventurous architectural specimen building for low-income housing right on the rail corridor, and just blow the city into a destination spot for a remarkable new modern community based on transit, and lure in some iconic, exciting architect to town. That's my sort of formed thought that I was sharing.
Thank you, Judy.
We also discussed creating a nightlife in that space behind Plaza.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to put your hand down and instead I muted you. Ellie.
That's okay. I didn't want to be rude. I was like, I was muted. It's cool. Oh, wait, it's fine. Okay. I don't know what the last thing you heard, but it was about creating a nightlife area behind Plaza Vigil. Instead of building housing there, build housing where the post office is, and instead use that as an open area space where we could potentially have a nightclub or dancing areas with open tables outside with fire pits, create a nightlife, because as of right now, we don't have anywhere we could go dancing, and not breweries. We have so many breweries, they're not doing it for us. You know what I mean? Like, create more of a space of nightlife downtown behind the Plaza Vigil, and keep the bean. That's a big one as well.
Yes, we've heard that one before as well. I think there are some themes to what we've been hearing. And Andrew, do you want to share our group? And then there are others if they want to jump in with anything Andrew may have missed.
Yeah, I'll follow the thread there with Plaza Vigil. We talked about really supporting the plaza and its immediate surroundings as the heart and making sure it's very interconnected. So we talked about that mid-block crossing right there by Plaza Vigil over to the plaza. And also making sure we have programming that is inviting new people, but also incorporating those that are already gathered and spending time in the plaza. And also expanding that programming to other small spaces around, like Stocer's Alley and the so-named Robo Plaza or Robo Park across from the plaza, including programming with collaborations with the recreation department. And we also talked about making sure pedestrian connections were also extended all the way to the hotels around Freedom and Main to make sure people visiting can get to the heart of town. There was support and excitement, like in the other groups, for the reduced travel lanes, creating outdoor dining parklets, making a destination where people want to eat, work, and play. And we talked about supporting businesses and attracting new businesses. Part of that is parklets. And part of the parklet consideration we talked about was parklet safety. And so we talked about trees, bollards, bulb outs, and parking lanes all being tools in supporting those parklets against traffic that may, occasionally leave their lanes. And yeah, and in supporting businesses, we also talked about one obstacle to new restaurants isn't that it's not possible, but that sometimes there's a barrier to creating the building infrastructure for building owners to allow restaurants. And let's see, we talked about bike lanes. We had a community member who bikes with their children on Walker up Beech to the heart of downtown. So that's an important route to emphasize. And safety for families in general is a point of emphasis. So part of that is programming, getting more folks downtown, making it feel safer, and incorporating transit as well. So alongside all these other streetscape improvements, making sure we have space and stops for buses. Did I miss anything?
Anyone else from our group? Anything to add? I think, Andrew, you did a good job covering what we talked about. We do have a few minutes. So were there any others who wanted to share thoughts that they may not have shared in their group? And then I wanted to share links to the survey that we would like you all to take and spread the word about.
And then we can have the next raffle.
That's right.
I just wanted to briefly note, I've been monitoring the Facebook, so anybody who's watching on the live stream, all of your comments are being taken down in our meeting notes and will be reviewed, but I just wanted to touch on a few comments. A lot of them are related to safety improvements and discussion of bike lanes, pedestrian safety along Walker Street and Rodriguez. Additionally, questions about who the spaces are for and the accessibility to the public, looking at supporting current businesses with outdoor seating and maybe looking at incubator programs like downtown Santa Cruz is doing for small businesses. Again, reiterating some of the discussion on Walker Street, talking about the current industrial uses and how that's going to translate to some of the visions for that area, congestion, parking related problems, and ultimately again, mostly focusing on infrastructure improvements like flashing crosswalks and shortening and support for shortening of blocks and making areas more walkable.
Thank you, Sarah. Kelsey, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry, that was an accident.
Okay. All right, let me share my screen again. We have a survey that is connected to the presentation you just saw. It's self-explanatory, so you don't need to have seen the presentation to take the survey. And Kelsey, if you don't mind sharing the link in the chat so folks can click on it. There are also, the links are provided on the city's website for folks to take the survey using that link. And starting, Justin, correct me, is it starting tomorrow or starting next week? There'll be a pop-up at the farmers market where folks will be able to take the survey, and we try and get the word out about it that way. It'll be open for about 5 weeks. So we'd like you to help us get the word out, take the survey, have your friends and family take it. And there'll be prizes associated with those who take the survey as well. They can be entered for a raffle.
That's correct. Yeah, we plan on having a booth at the farmers market tomorrow and for the next 5 weeks. So barring any unforeseen hiccups, we'll be there and be looking forward to sharing this with the wider community and about what we're looking into and getting that feedback from people as well. So we encourage you all to take it and to share it widely with your friends and contacts too, so that we get both so people know about this and also we get to hear from people and their views on the matter.
Okay, and I think the survey links were shared. And the last item is we'll do 2 more raffles actually. The prizes this time are to gift cards for Togo and then LYA produce. So Kelsey, you're on. All right. Our first winner is Michael B. If you want to share your information private through the chat to Kelsey or Elena, they can make arrangements with you. And our next winner is Sylvia Luna. Congratulations, Sylvia and Michael. And Sylvia, we know how to reach you, so you're good there. All right.
Let's see. Look,
Sylvia, you have your hand up, and you're muted.
Yeah, I can't. The chat function's been disabled.
Ooh.
Oh.
Well, that's a problem. Huh. Okay.
Why don't we share Elena's email and you can email her? Would that work?
Yes, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Kelsey, do you mind, or Elena, if you want to drop your email in there? Sylvia, you have your hand up?
Oh, I was just going to say,
ahead.
I see Sylvia and Ellie have their hands up. So yeah.
Yeah. So Sylvia first, Ellie next. Sylvia, you're muted.
Is it possible to use my email and have other people submit the survey?
Sorry,
did you hear me?
I'm not sure. I did, but I'm not sure I understood your question. Could you repeat it?
For the survey, is it okay to use my email, but have different people do the survey?
That's a good question. I think that should be fine. They can take it anonymously if they like as well. But if they want to be entered for the raffle, then it would need to be a unique address.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Ellie?
Yeah, so I'm skimming through the survey, right? And my question is if we could get some demographics, I think that would be very important to see who in our city is doing the surveys, inputting their survey, and see what kind of quantitative data we can get, and qualitative data that we can get, so that we know who is answering how. So I think that demographics are really important. I feel like there's ways that we can add that in. But that, yeah, I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. And that's a really good point that you raised, that tracking demographics of who is taking the survey is important for the analysis we do. And as you go through the survey, there's 3 pages to it. And when you get through page 1 and then 2, the last page does ask demographic questions that we think will be helpful for our analysis. The first survey that we did last fall had the same questions, and the report that was produced for it contained the same or similar demographic questions as well. And that report is available on the project website.
Awesome, thank you. I just hadn't gotten to that page yet.
No worries. Other questions, comments? If not, I'd like to thank you all for spending your evening with us. I know you all have other things and important things to do, so we appreciate you taking the time to join us and give us your feedback. And I wish you a very good evening. We look forward to bringing back more concrete recommendations as a part of the specific plan when it's available for review later on this fall. So thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.